think of some of the key elements when you look at mobility. It's a very different model around not only the IT infrastructure, but also the security infrastructure associated to mobile devices. Those types of devices add new paradigms of risk associated to how you manage data aspects, how you actually manage the information that's associated that will be sitting on those devices, and how that information can actually be used. So I see that as there's a different type of risk. I don't know that it's like a huge risk that's much larger than anything else previously, but it's a different model that we actually have to look at from a security perspective that we haven't had in our development process around policies or government policies currently, nor have we had to look at it anywhere, fairly recently on how we manage those types of devices. The greatest threat to mobile devices, again, goes back to tying information in those devices. And the older paradigm of security policies were able to lock down laptops and desktop components so we could actually have a common operating environment. This is what you can do, this is what you can't do with it. The idea of mobile devices, in order to be really mobile, you should have access to the information that you need when you need it, and then you're on the go with that type of information. And it's on a much smaller form factor type of device. If you look at tablets and you look at smartphones, much smaller form factor, easier to lose, unfortunately. Gives you a lot of capability, but you have to look at what is the risk associated, the type of information that's going to be loaded on that device, and then how do you protect that information and tie it to a use case of that user themselves. Having a mobile workforce is just key in any environment today, right? It doesn't matter if it's the commercial world or whether it's the government world. There's not a lot that happens, that a lot of work that gets done can be done in an office, but a lot also gets happened out in the field in very many organizations and agencies in the government. The idea would be, how do you look at defining very specific policies, security policies, use policies, and even operational objectives to those devices and how they can actually be utilized, and if you can actually restrict access to confidential information that you need to get your job done. And again, back to the government or the commercial world, there's confidential information that you have to have access to. How do you manage that information, and how do you control where that information can go? So it's really more of a data-centric security policy than it has been in the past, where it would be a device or a user-centric security policy tied to other types of devices. The critical steps really are, number one, define what your potential risk strategy would be. Right? You're bringing new types of devices with new capabilities into your IT environment, and you have to look at what kind of impact will that have to your overall IT risk posture. It's not going to be, well, we have desktops and laptops, and that's going to have one risk posture. We're going to have mobile devices, and that will have a second type of risk posture associated to it. These people are going to access the same information no matter whether they're on the laptop, whether they're on a tablet, whether they're on a smartphone. You need access to the same types of information. So the idea is, step one is understand what that additional risk is to your organization, and then how do you start looking at the remediation steps to reduce the impact of that risk into your overall IT environment. And that ties back into certain things like, you do have to manage these devices to some degree so that you know what's accessing your information. And being able to manage the devices allows you to be more granular in your policy for mobile components. So you have to have a management perspective, but that has to be tied into your overall IT management components as well. Again, they can't be separate. They really have to be together. It has to be kind of a collaboration of efforts between IT management, IT security management, and mobile device management. They all have to come together. I think that really is the first one, because that's how you start defining what your risk posture is and how you can remediate some of that. So there's a couple of thoughts around this one. I had some recent conversations with some folks over at GSA about that. And the idea is, we have become a very mobile society. We all know that, right? We have our smartphones. Everybody has had a cell phone for years, pretty much. Not everyone, but a lot of people. And then we have our smartphones, and now people are moving into the tablet environments because they're cool, they're sleek, they're easy to use, right? We get the stuff on it that we want to get on it with the applications. And that's what the citizens of the United States have. That's the access points that they are starting to want to use more so than sitting at their desktop or sitting at their laptop, right? And doing the standard kind of interface into the US government websites. The thing to think about that though is, number one, there has to be a different content model. There has to be mobile content associated, right? There has to be a mobile content model associated to those websites, because I can't see the same thing on my iPhone with the same kind of screen resolution that I would on my laptop if I went into tsa.gov, right? What I would need to do is have mobile applications. But in order for those applications to start becoming more interactive, then you have to start looking at a level of authentication and identifying who's coming into that. I'm sure no one wants to go into the VA, start looking up their benefits, and not having been authenticated to actually see that information from an interactive standpoint, right? I may need to make changes to information on different government websites. I should be able to do that from any type of device. Shouldn't matter what type of device I'm connecting to, but there still needs to be a level of authentication to do that. It was mentioned earlier today about, from a banking perspective, you go in and you put your username and your password, right? And that's your credentials, that's your authentication to get into your banking system. But there's a lot of other pieces that come into play, right? If you've ever gone out to your bank and you normally do it from one computer, and you move to a different computer to do that, it will catch you, right? Because it's profiled you, and it has set cookies associated to profile that this is the information is correct, the right user and password, but it's not the right device, right? So we have to utilize, I think, moving into that type of environment for citizens to access information on government websites, a much stronger identification, authentication system than what is in place today. Especially if you want these systems to be interactive, which is really most people want that type of information today, not just I'll read it, I'll print it out, normal, I just see what I need to see, that's all I get. Now I have to get on the phone, or I have to go to a building someplace to get the additional information. That's not the way the model works in today's society. So identification, authentication, and being able to tie that in interactive mobile content websites, I think, is very, very key from that type of environment.